to the special session with my guest, Lacy Boggs, who I think is probably on this side, maybe. Maybe she's on this side, whatever side she's on. And really glad to see everybody here. I saw a little bit of confusion about tech, so let me just touch on that really quick. If you haven't been on Crowdcast before, it all happens within this window right here. If you have any problems with audio or video, you should just close the browser and come back. Just open the browser window again. You'll be right back in. There's no, once you're signed in, there's no, password or anything like that to deal with. And so that should all be fine. Also, if you are struggling to get this to work, Chrome is the best browser for Crowdcast. Okay, second thing is, if you have questions, and I see 4 people already do, there's an ask a question button right down here below. You can load those questions in there, and then when Lacy gets to her Q&A section, you can actually get your questions answered. Okay. Yeah. And I also have helpful many time attendees in the comments who can help you with tech as well. So thank you guys for doing that. So great to see everybody showing up here. I see tons of people already here. We got Mary and JM Hunter. I have, JM, I always called you JM, but then you signed off the other day in your email as Hunter. So you'll have to tell me about that. Sylvia likes my hairstyle. Thank you. I like it too.
It's very excited about that. Flattering. Yeah.
It's a little grown out right now, but I'm testing how far it can grow out and be happy. So
it's cute.
Michi's here. Hi, Michi and Kathleen and Verena and Nina, Marianne, lots and lots of people. Really, really great to see you all. So hello, welcome. And I was just telling Lacy before we went live that this is not a thing I've done a lot of before in terms of helping you guys with concrete topics and how do you get your work out there. I've done a little bit, but not a ton. And so I'm really excited to find out what kind of questions you have and help you move along the path to getting your work seen in a way that feels super consistent with who you are and what your work is and what your goals are. And Lacy is excellent at that. I've been following Lacy for, at least a couple of years. And bought a course from her, which I thought was really, really great. We can talk about that later, about how to build an editorial calendar and the kind of things we're going to talk about here. And Lacy has gone through this really. So Lacy, let me back up. Lacy is a content strategist, which means she helps you think strategically about what your content marketing is going to look like, and that's what we're talking about today. And she has evolved into that out of being a ghost blogger, which is somebody who writes posts for other people's blogs in their voice, which I think is kind of amazing. What a cool job. I never thought of that before. And she comes to that with a history as a journalist, award-winning journalist, and a history also of studying film. And so she has a whole storytelling, framework for how she works. She also secretly is working on a novel, guys. Feel free to ask her about that. So she's one of us, in other words. And watching her over the last few years, following her emails really closely, her blog posts and stuff has been super, super helpful for me in understanding my own strategy and what I want to do with content, even doing a thing like this that we're doing right today, largely influenced by stuff that Lacy has said in the past about how you might help your subscribers and how you can make content that makes sense for people and figure out how this stuff's going. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Lacy.
Thank you. That was an awesome intro. I'm like, am I blushing? It felt really cool. I'm super, super excited to be here with you guys. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I think I will just go ahead and figure out how to share my slides while I'm talking here. And yeah, so, you're in the right place if you're interested in figuring out how to set some content goals, by which I mean, that's kind of a jargony thing to say. But what I mean is we have to figure out why we're sharing content before we share it. So that's what I want to talk about today. And, when I'm talking about content.
Why are you doing it before you do it?
Yeah, right? And part of the reason I want to share that is because so often we're told, oh, you're supposed to have a blog. You should have a blog. You need to have a blog. But nobody ever says why or what you're supposed to do with it. So that's kind of what I want to try to clear up a little bit today. And also I want to share, like when I speak about content, I usually say blog or blogging because I'm a writer and that's my thing. But this refers to all kinds of content. So if your content is Instagram photos because you're a photographer or an artist, great, this applies. If you're an animator, if you're a filmmaker, if you are a podcaster, if you're a musician, whatever you do, that's content. So this still applies, okay? So just because I'm talking about blogging doesn't mean you have to have a physical written blog. Or actually, blogs aren't physical, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so that's where we're going to get started. The other thing I wanted to say is that I love answering questions. Like Q&A is my favorite part of these presentations. So please feel free to ask questions. Probably the question button is the best way to do that if you want it answered at the end, because I may or may not catch it if it's in the chat box. But if you want me to speak to something particular, like if you're a fine artist and you're not sure how this applies to you or something like that, yeah, let me know, and we will try to get your questions answered to the best of my abilities. So today what you're going to be learning is how to identify some content marketing goals, the power of working backwards from those content marketing goals to make your plan, and then some discussion of different types of content that will help you reach different goals. Because one of my big soapboxes is that different types of posts, different types of content are better suited to reach different types of goals. So we'll talk about that towards the end there. So a little bit about me. I mean, Jessica gave me a really nice intro, but I will just share, yes, I have a degree in film, actually in moving image arts, because we're artsy and fancy. Santa Fe, which I was just telling Jessica, just closed. So I have a degree in film from a school that no longer exists, which is like so weird and existential. I don't know what to do with it. And I tried to break into Hollywood. Hollywood and I did not get along. I had to have a quarter life crisis. And then I got back into my first love, which was writing. I worked for a PR agency in the fine jewelry industry when we were living in California, which if you ever want like weird, trippy, change your entire perception of what money is worth, like work in the fine jewelry industry, because that's a weird thing to do. And then we moved to Colorado, and I got a job as a copy editor for a company that makes official travel guides. So like the free ones you pick up in the airport. I wrote those for several years, and then I worked as a magazine editor. And then I got pregnant, and I didn't want to work 60-hour weeks and be on deadline at 3 in the morning anymore. And so I quit my job. And I was a food writer at the time. So of course I started a food blog, because that's what you do, right? If you're a food writer, you start a food blog. And it did okay. Like the blog itself got pretty popular. I was getting 10,000 hits a month. I grew an email list of 1,000 people within a year. I was getting offered guest posting gigs on Martha Stewart websites. And I think I made about $50 that first year from that business. You know, people talk about 6-figure businesses. I had a 2-figure business. It was great. But what I realized was that the business model, I didn't really understand the business model of food blogging, and I needed to make money faster than that. So I thought, well, I'm pretty good at this blogging thing. Maybe somebody would pay me to do that. And turns out, lo and behold, yes, they would. So I don't know if I invented ghost blogging, Jessica, but like I kind of just came up with it out of the air. I didn't know it was a thing either until I started selling it. And then from there, I started to grow because people were asking me, what should I blog about? How should I do this? What should I be writing about? And so I took it upon myself to educate myself about marketing and content marketing in particular, and realized that I kind of disagreed with a lot of the information that was out there. And so I started giving strategy as part of what I do. And that's how this whole thing has grown. And now I have a boutique marketing agency. We can do a little bit of everything. I have 3 wonderful writers under me, and it's a good thing. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. Now let's talk about you. So the very first thing I want to talk about with you is, what are your content goals? And so when I say that, what I mean is like, what do you want to get out of this? You want to share what you're doing with an audience. What do you want to get back? So if you have an answer for that question, put it in the comments for me, because I'd be really interested to hear. But in general, we kind of don't think about that sometimes, especially if you're not used to running your art, your creativity, whatever you do as a business. You may not be thinking in those terms, right? You may not be, you're thinking, oh, well, I have to have a blog because people need to find me, or I have to have a newsletter because that's what you do. You know, you collect email addresses and then you send out a newsletter. But you don't have a real goal for your business attached to it. Okay, so some people are saying, I just want to change the world. Well, good for you, Liz. Good. That's good. I like that. It's nice small goals. Jennifer says, I want to know I'm adding value for them. Mary says, sell artwork. Mary, you're my favorite right now because that's where we're going with this, right?
Can I ask you a question having to do with this? So, so somebody who's a visual artist and wants to sell artwork, do you make any distinction between? I mean, I do. So, you know, full disclosure, but the work that you're creating and then the work that you are creating about the work in order to, you know, so when I talk about content, I'm often talking about work, the creative work. Yes, it is creative work, but that's like at a meta level around the piece or whatever it is.
Right.
So when you say content goals, I'm looking at that and saying like, not what is my goal with like my painting practice or my, you know, my novel, like in and of itself, but my goal in the world with this thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I agree with you 110%. So like I could consider what I provide to my clients as content. It is content. That's what I do, you know. However, especially if I'm selling a course or something like that's very clearly I've produced this content to sell to you, right? But what I'm talking about more is like the marketing content. So the content around the content, as you put it, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So I think I might clarify the question for people when they're answering in the chat there is like, what is your goal when you're posting about your work, either in a blog or on Instagram or whatever? Like what is your goal with that content? Not the main thing that you're doing, but like the stuff that you're using to sort of present your work to the world.
Totally. Yeah. So yeah, there's some great examples here. Like Karen says, I like blogging about my process and I'd like to know how to connect that to selling my comics and my art. Yeah. So that's exactly what we're talking about. So the content that surrounds the content. So when we're talking about these goals, we kind of have to tap back into what is that big why? Why are we doing this in the first place? And a lot of you have hit the nail on the head, you know, sell my art, sell my comics, sell my books, get commissions, reach new fans, right? All those kinds of things that you guys are talking about over there, that's your kind of big why for your business. But there's actually two whys that we have to consider, right? So there's the goal for your business and there's the goal for your audience. So what I mean by that is for your business, it's selling books, it's selling artwork, it's getting commissions, whatever that is that makes you money, right? That's your goal in the end. 99% of the time, that's people's ultimate goal when they have a business. Sometimes people will be like, well, I want to build a community, or I want to teach, or I hear this a lot in the coaching space. I want to build a community of women that can support each other. And that is a noble goal, but really your goal then is to sell them coaching, right? If you're a life coach, that's really what the goal is. So your ultimate goal is almost always to make money at whatever it is that you do. However, your goal for your audience is a little bit different. So that's a question where you ask, why is the audience coming to me? And probably you've thought about this as an artist or a creative person. You've thought about like, who is that person that resonates with my work? Why do they come to me? Why are they reading my book as opposed to the next book on the shelf? Why are they following my art? Why are they doing these things, right? So I always say that there's really kind of just three big reasons a reader or an audience will follow a creative person, a person who's creating content. It's either to be educated, to be entertained, or to be inspired. And sometimes it's a combination of two of those things. So for example, I'm pretty sure that most of the time people are following me to be educated, right? They want to learn about how to do their content. Maybe a tiny bit entertained because I'm a little bit funny in my posts and stuff, and I have a very conversational style. It's not real dry, but mostly it's educational. If you're a visual artist or a photographer or a filmmaker, your reason might be that they want to be inspired. They just love seeing your artwork, right? Or they're inspired to do it. For Jessica, it might be a combination of education and inspiration. So like you're educating people, but you're also probably inspiring them to do their creative work. So we have to kind of think about which one our audience is coming to us for so that we understand how to give them what they want. That make sense? So once we kind of know what our goals are, we can kind of say, yes, these are our goals. We can start defining the metrics by which we track those goals, okay? And what I want to challenge you this today is to ask yourself, are you tracking the right metrics? Are you tracking the metrics that actually show whether or not you're making progress to your goals? And I'm going to show you what I mean about that. But sometimes we're tracking the wrong things. So especially when you have a blog, people get really hung up on comments. Everybody wants comments. And who doesn't want comments? I love getting comments. I got some this morning and I was like, oh, I feel so fancy. People must have resonated with this post. And the comments are awesome, but they don't necessarily lead directly to a sale, right? I can get all the comments in the world, but if nobody hits the buy now button, it's not actually impacting my business, right? So that's what we call a vanity metric. A vanity metric is something that's fun to track, fun to see, fun to look at, but doesn't actually reflect how we're doing on our goals. So some examples of these things might be like Facebook likes. Just because you get a whole bunch of Facebook likes on a beautiful picture you put up doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to buy from you, right? Blog comments is another good one. I would argue that like Instagram followers to a certain extent would be a vanity metric because, you know, anybody, like if you pay one of those bots, anybody can get 10,000 followers, right? It doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just like, yes, follow trains. It's exactly right. Somebody mentioned follow trains where like you say, okay, I'll follow you if you follow me and then I'll follow this person. Yeah, anybody can do that, right? It doesn't necessarily increase the size of people who will buy from you. So you want to make sure you're tracking the right metrics. So what are the metrics that'll actually determine whether or not you're getting closer to your goals, right? So for most people, that might look like email lists, email signups. If you sell things through email, like if you put out a notice that says, hey, I have a new collection of artwork you can buy, I have new prints in the shop, my new book is coming out. If you market via email, then email signups is a good metric because that's who you market to, right? Another good example might just be like how many people visit your sales page, whatever that looks like. If that's a product page or if that's an Amazon page, if you're selling a book, you know, like how many people are actually seeing it. I say the Amazon page, but I don't know that you can actually track how many people see your Amazon page, so that may not be a great metric, but you see what I mean. If you have a sales page, how many people are on your Patreon? Somebody just mentioned Patreon. That's a great one. Like how many people are visiting that page? How many people are signing up? Those are good metrics to follow. So I'm going to give you some numbers here. These numbers were originally designed with businesses that sell a lot of, so what am I trying to say? Sell a volume of things in mind. So for example, if you're a fine artist, you don't necessarily have to sell 1,000 paintings. You need to sell one at $80,000 every quarter or whatever it is, right? Your goals are going to be slightly different. So if you have specific questions about this, please feel free to ask in the comments or in the question button. But so for people who sell fewer items at higher price points, your conversion rates and numbers will be a little different than what I'm about to present to you. But this is kind of a good overall overview, right? Okay, so goals, we might have a revenue goal or a sales goal, right? So we want to say, I need to sell X number of books this month to make my revenue goal. I need to get X number of Patreon subscribers. I need to sell so many commissions. I worked with a fine artist who had several levels of art that she wanted to sell. So she had, for example, 6 pieces that were like museum quality and size. And those went for like anywhere between $60,000 and $100,000 a piece. So she only needed to sell 6 of those, right? That's all she had. But then she also had another level that were like for serious collectors that were between maybe $5,000 and $15,000. And then she had a series of prints that were more for people who like go to art shows that were between like $25 and $100. So she had different revenue and sales goals for her different levels. I just thought I'd throw that out there since I know we have some artists. So then you want to look at like, okay, if I need to make X number of sales, how many leads do I need to get to make that number of sales, right? And so that's where we get into conversion rate. So this is like how many people need to see the offer in order to make the number of sales I want to make.
Can we get a little bit precise about what leads means?
Yes. So a lead is somebody who sees the offer, who's aware of you. You're making an offer to that person. So a lot of times that means it's an email address that you've collected, because then you can market to that person and make an offer. It may also be like, how many people, so for me, it's how many people sign up to get on the phone with me. That's a lead, right? Because if they sign up to get on the phone with me, I know I can close 50% of those people. 50% of the people who get on the phone with me end up buying something. So that's how I talk about a lead. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it's terminology that not
it's a technical terminology. Yes, thank you for stopping me, because a lot of times I'm talking
something different. It can mean something different for different people. So, and there can be also different levels of leads. You can have cold leads, or you can have warm leads. You can have hot leads.
Absolutely.
So, somebody who is on your email list and, writes you an email answering every time you send out a newsletter is a hot lead. Right? Like, that's a hot lead. But like, people who sign up and don't open it, they're cold. They're like cooler. I wouldn't say cold, but because they're on your list, but like, they're probably not doing anything. So
cold is somebody that's never heard of you, that doesn't know you exist. Like, cold would be you're going down the phone book, just randomly calling people.
Cold is like you go, well, don't do that. Yeah. But cold is like you go to a Facebook group full of people interested in the kind of thing you do, but they've never heard of you. They're cold leads, but they're likely to be interested in what you are doing.
Right. And so then the thing, you go bigger than that. So think of these as circles, right? So your sales, your customers are like the smallest circle. The next circle is your leads, people who might be interested in buying. And then the next circle out is like impressions or traffic. So like, if you happen to be running a Facebook ad, that's impressions, right? How many people saw that ad? You could also measure how many people come to your website overall. So like, if you know that 1,000 people come to your website every month, just from traffic, they just find you for whatever reason, that's the number of impressions, right? And then the number of people who sign up for your emails would be leads, and then customers would be the smallest concentric circle there. So the reason I'm asking you to think about these things is that there are some average numbers we can put to these to know how many people we need in each of those circles, right? So if I want X number of leads, X number of sales, how many leads do I need? How much traffic do I need, right? We can back it out. So this is where we get into where I'm talking about working backwards. These are just some averages. These are across industries. So you can probably look up, you can Google your own industry and find out kind of what conversion rates for websites in your industry look like. But overall, any sales page, any product page, if somebody gets as far as looking at the page where they can hit the buy now button, the average conversion rate on a sales page is 1 to 3%. So only 1 to 3% of people who land on that page will actually hit the buy now button and buy something, okay? When you have an opt-in, which is where they're joining your email list, 10% is average. You may have much higher or you may have much lower, right? And then when you're on a webinar like this kind of thing, if you're selling something, 5% is average on a live webinar like this. Now this, again, these are just averages. As I mentioned before, like when I get on the phone with somebody, I have a 50% conversion rate. When, my artist friend client talks to curators that she knows that have bought her work before, like a gallery owner or something, she may have a wildly different conversion rate talking to gallery owners than she does talking to average art collectors, right? So you kind of have to think about what your conversion rate is, but this is to give you some very round numbers, okay? So I want to give you an example of why this is useful. So if we're going to say that your sales revenue goal is you want to make $50,000 this year selling something at $1,000 a piece, okay? This is just so I could do easy math. That means we need 50 sales at $1,000 each, right? To get 50 sales, I need between 1,700 and 5,000 leads. That's that 1 to 3%. So I need on my email list, if I'm selling through email, I need between 1,700 and 5,000 people to make 50 sales at $1,000. And in order to get 5,000 leads, I need 50,000 people, roughly, to see the opt-in. So to see my call to say, hey, join my email list, join my email list, join my email list, right? So 50,000 people feels like a lot of people, right? Like that feels like a huge number, but don't freak out. okay? Because it's really not as hard to get to that big number as you might think, because that could be people who hit your website. That could be people you talk to on Facebook that have liked you on Facebook. That could be people who follow you on Instagram or Twitter or Pinterest. That could be groups you're in. That could be all these things, right? So it's not one channel, it's all your channels. Okay, now I'm a little concerned that maybe I'm losing people. So if you have questions, please ask. But I wanted to run these numbers because what I think people forget is they're like, oh, I'm going to make 50 sales and I'll make $50,000 and it'll be amazing. Oh, good. People are saying we're all good. Awesome. And I just want you to understand that sometimes to make 50 sales, you have to reach a much, much larger number of people. Okay. Kind of a numbers game. Were you going to ask a question, Jessica, or say something?
I was just going to say that I think that this is something that's, it's one of the reasons why for a lot of people who are here, who are cartoonists and they produce low cost items that they have to sell a lot of, conversion rates can be higher, like for that, because it's just not very expensive. So people can spend the money on it. On the other hand, you need to reach vastly more people with that initial contact level.
Yeah.
And so this is a thing where this is why people talk all the time about using Facebook ads or like Amazon ads, using something in order to just get your thing in front of more people and get sort of that initial contact point with more people. And I think that a lot of people who are working where they're what they do requires selling lots of low cost items. It's hard to get into that mindset of like, I need to build a kind of mass market machine, even though I'm just an individual. And we have the tools for that, but you got to get your brain around it.
Yeah. And actually this goes back to what I didn't understand when I was a food blogger. So that's a great example because as a food blogger, I was trying to sell ebooks that were like $4.99 to $9.99. Okay, that's great, but I have to reach a whole lot of people to make those sales, and then I'm working exceptionally hard for $5, right? And so I not only have to reach a whole lot of people to make a sale, I have to reach even exponentially more because that's why I only made $50, right? Because I'm selling them at $5 a click. So it was things like that are economies of scale, right? So it's what I call the Walmart model, not to be like the negative connotations of Walmart, but like the way Walmart's business model works is that they can only offer those very low prices because they sell a ton of stuff, right? So that's why they can offer low prices. It's an economies of scale. So yeah, the reason I throw these numbers out here is not to freak you out. Some people were saying, yeah, but how do we get those people? And we'll get there. Don't worry. We'll get there. But the point is more like to kind of understand that you do have to reach a whole lot of people in order to make those goals. The other thing is to give you realistic goals. Okay. So I want to tell a sad story about myself because it's a really great, illustration of why understanding these numbers is important. So 2 years ago, I decided to really focus on selling my course. And I spent the whole first half of the year growing my list. I tripled my email list in 6 months. So that worked out really well. Did exactly what I wanted it to do, right? And then I spent the second 6 months of the year marketing and selling this course. And I had set a goal of selling 50 seats. I think it was 50. I don't remember. Selling a certain number of seats in my course, right? So I go through months of marketing and launching, and it's such a big deal and all this stuff. And I did webinars and I did this and that and the other thing. And I missed my goal. I missed it by like 5 people. So then I was done. I was ready to burn it all down. I was like, screw this. I'm over it. I did all this work. I didn't hit my goal. I'm just mad and grumpy and really disappointed in myself, right? And a month or two after that, when I'm still trying to figure out, like, what do I do with my life? My business sucks, I met with a sales expert, and she told me some of these numbers. And she was like, let's run the numbers. Let's see how you did. Well, I told you a couple slides ago that the average conversion rate is 1% to 3%. I had converted at 4.5%. So I had done better than average. The problem was my goal was too high. My goal was too high for the number of people who saw the offer. So it had nothing to do with the offer. It had nothing to do with the sales page. It had to do with, I had set an unreasonable goal for myself. And so that's another thing I want to caution you against. Like if you're like, I need to sell 10,000 books. Well, great. And if you think that means you need to reach 10,000 people and every single one of those people is going to buy a book, you're incorrect. You know, you actually probably need to show that book to 100,000 people or more. So that's why I share these numbers, not to scare you, to give you some realistic goals. So we don't want to freak out. I forgot where I am in my presentation. So if you know where you are or where you need to go, you can map out how to get there, right? So that's the whole point. We can work backwards from those goals to set smaller goals to see how to get there, right? So if I know, wait, that's too fast. I don't want to go to that slide yet. So if I know that I need, whatever it is, I need 10,000 people to see my offer, then I can start thinking backwards. Great. What do I do to get my offer in front of 10,000 people in order to make those sales, right? What do I do in order to get there? How do I get in front of those 10,000 people? So not all types of content are going to get you where you want to go, okay? One of the sad lessons I learned, so after I spent that whole year selling my course, even after I learned that it wasn't me, it wasn't my fault, I hadn't done anything wrong, my goal was just wrong, I decided that launching and selling my course was not what I wanted to do in my business, okay? So what I wanted to do was serve people more one-on-one. So I pivoted my whole business. And what I learned was that I had been producing all this content with freebies and opt-ins and free worksheets and free this, that, and the other to get people to join my list. And so I had trained all those people to want these free things to tell them how to write blogs. So they didn't want to pay me to write the blogs for them. I was producing the wrong kind of content to attract the type of client I wanted, okay? And so this is something I see a lot with makers and creative types that I want to caution you against. I want to make sure you're producing the right kind of content that's attracting people who actually want to buy what you sell. So the most classic, yes, she beat me to it. Is it Mary? The classic example of this is writers who blog about how to write. That's great if you're writing about books about how to write. If you're writing speculative fiction, your readers don't necessarily want to read about how to write. They might be interested in your process, like I was struggling with this character, I was doing this, but they don't want, here's how to write a character sheet, right? They don't care. They're not writers, they're readers. So we have to ask ourselves, are we producing the kind of content that will get us where we want to go in terms of attracting people who will buy what we're selling?
And let me just add, this is incredibly hard for people to absorb. Like I can't tell you how many times I have cartoonists blogging about how to lay out a page or something like that. I've done that, but then I actually went ahead and made textbooks about comics. So it kind of, in the end, made sense. But like, except Karen just got in there. What about Comics Artsy blog about how to make comics all the time, right?
Same
it's
thing.
the easiest thing to do because it's what you're thinking about all the time. But the thing about marketing, and this is something I think can really help people change their attitude toward marketing, is effective marketing, good marketing is an act of deep, deep empathy with your audience. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about what is your audience looking for? What is the thing that when they see your work, it's going to touch them. They're going to really understand something about the world or whatever. And so that's the way, for me, that's the way to turn this around and think about like what's going to be effective is like really thinking about like what's going to work for these people that's going to really make them, is part of a journey towards buying your thing and then enjoying it and having a, fairly intense relationship with you as a creator. Like you're building a relationship with people.
And that's such a good point, because this goes back to one of the first slides I shared. Like, what is the audience's goal in coming to you? What is their goal in consuming your content? Because it's probably not to learn to draw comics unless you're writing textbooks on how to draw comics, right? So it's all about what Jessica was talking about, like figuring out what do they want from you. So Karen saying the story behind the work, maybe, yes, maybe. I think about some of my favorite authors that I follow or have followed, and a lot of times it's because I like them personally, right? I'm interested in what they're doing with their work, but I also am interested in them personally. So like Neil Gaiman is a great example of this. He has a really fun Tumblr, and a lot of it is updates about like, oh, we're producing Good Omens and it's going to be a TV show, and look at these photos from the set, which is super fun if you're a fan of Good Omens. But it's also like he answers questions about from readers. He talks about stuff he's doing. He talks about stuff his wife is doing. And it's really more like his personal blog almost, with the extension of, I like his art, I like his novels, and therefore I like him, right? I think John Green, who's a YA author, is another really good example of this. He became exceptionally popular as a video blogger because he was talking about all these issues that teenagers were really worried about, concerned about. So he was talking to girls about like, if your boyfriend is being controlling, that's not a good boyfriend, get rid of him. Or he was talking about racism or sexism or things like that teenagers were really interested in, and he was kind of providing advice. And he and his brother now have a podcast. I think they've switched away from vlogging to podcasting, but it's called something like, I think it's called Dear Hank and John, but the subtitle is Dubious Advice. Because they talk about all kinds of things and basically give advice. But he sells YA fiction novels, and he's just speaking to his audience in a different way.
I love this idea because, you know, a lot of people get sort of boxed into feeling like they have to talk about their process or something. But if you go back a few slides from here, you don't have to do it. But I'm saying, like, remember back to the why. So you have the why of why are you doing content marketing? You have your bigger why of like, why are you making the thing that you make?
Yeah.
You know, like, why do you actually do the art that you make? You know,
change the world. Somebody said.
You want to change the world, right? So if you are doing blogging or content marketing that's basically also on that same topic, helping people with that same thing, you're much more likely to first of all, be attracting people who are going to care about your thing. And second of all, give them reasons to want to support you and have this relationship with you.
Mm-hmm. So Marie brings up I'm not sure if it's Marie or Mary, so apologies, brings up a great point. She says, I feel like those authors are being followed because people read their books and not the other way around, i.e. people saw, like the other way around being people saw their blogs and decided to read their books. That might be true of Neil Gaiman. That might be true of John Green. However, I believe you can do it the other way as well. So if you're talking about, if you're interesting and you're a thought leader in a space, whatever that space is, you can absolutely become popular and then say, by the way, I wrote this book. Or by the way, I have this art that I sell. Suzanne says she found Neil Gaiman's blog first. We'll see. There you go. I think too, like there's an indie author I follow that I've been following for years and years and years because I started following him because he was a big name in fan fiction. He was a big name in fandom. And then when he started self-publishing his novels, I bought several of them because I enjoyed his blog and I enjoyed his fan fiction. So anyway, the point being, I think you can come at it both ways. Yes, I'm sure that there are plenty of creatives who have gotten popular after their thing got popular, but I'm sure there are plenty who have gone the other way as well. I have this chart in here. I think I'm just going to kind of gloss over it very quickly because I'm not sure how much of it really applies to you guys. But basically, it's that you need to think about what are you producing in terms of your goals. So this is more for like straight up business people as opposed to creatives. But like if you're blogging for these reasons on the left, can you see my mouse? I'm like gesturing wildly. The SEO, customer retention, thought leadership, like those are your reasons for blogging. And then across the top are the types. So what I learned the hard way, what I fell on my butt learning was that how to blog posts weren't going to sell my let me blog for you service, right? Because people who want to know how to blog they want to do it themselves. They don't want to have somebody else do it. And the people who want somebody else to do it don't want to know how to blog. So the same thing about writers writing about how to write or cartoonists writing about how to draw cartoons. You have to ask yourself, that's the easiest thing to produce because that's what we know, but is that actually going to get you to your goals? Okay. And we may have to think sideways what else are our people interested in order to get back to like, what do they want to read from us? So maybe they are interested in the process. Maybe they want to watch you draw. Corey Huff told me about a client of his who is an artist, and he every Friday does a live Facebook salon type thing. So it's like the sort of event you would go to at a gallery. He invites like musicians to come into his studio, and he does a Facebook Live of him drawing and the musicians playing. And like thousands of people show up to watch this, which is amazing to me. I think that's fantastic. Like that he took something that's normally done in a brick space and put it online. But it's literally just people show up to watch him draw and listen to music. And then we assume some of them love his work so much that they purchase his artwork, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be that if you want to change the world, awesome, write about that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be like, watch me do this cool thing. This is how I make my art. We've all seen those videos that go viral, which is like sped up somebody drawing something that looks really cool, and we watch the whole process. Maybe that's what people come to you for. So you just have to ask yourself, what are they coming for? Somebody asked earlier in the chat, like, how do we know what they want? Well, you have to do a little asking. Yeah, you have to ask. You have to make some assumptions if you don't have an audience yet, or if you have a very small audience, you have to make some educated guesses, right? You have to say, well, I think they're here because of X, so let's just test that out and find out. No one wants to see a sped up version of me sitting at my computer typing. No, that is true. Although I hired a book coach a couple of years ago to help me finish the first draft of my novel, and she started doing a thing where she literally did share her screen while she was drafting and talked about the process, because her whole thing was like, now she was a book coach, so she was talking about how to do the process, but she was like, I think nobody talks about the process of drafting, so I'm going to show people, here's how I draft a novel, here's what I do. And so that was one of the pieces of content that she put out. Now again, you have to take that into account, because that's what she sold, was how to write books. But you never know, maybe somebody does want to watch you write. Who knows? Okay, so I've pretty much reached the end of my prepared statements here. So I would love to start.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions here. So
good. I'm good on time too, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Good for me. Okay, am I driving the questions?
You go and you do your own pace there. I'll hit start answering whenever you're.
Perfect. Okay. Ooh, it's changing while I watch it. Yeah, okay, so we can vote on things. Somebody's asking, okay, so Benjamin, hi, Ben. How much time do you set aside per week or per month to plan and produce content? Such a good question. Okay, so you need to time yourself a little bit here. So probably you know how long it takes you to produce something creative, more or less. The better, the more you get into it, the more you know how many hours X thing will take you. The same goes for blogging. So like I can write a 1,500 word blog post in an hour. Not many people can do that. So you need to like time yourself a few times and find out how long does it take you to produce that content so that you can plan for it ahead of time. In terms of planning, I generally sit down for a couple of hours once a quarter or once every 6 months to plan out my big picture. And that's a whole other webinar that I could do for you guys sometime if you want, or you can come to my website and find and look up information about editorial calendars. But basically, I look at my calendar and I say, what do I want to sell? And then let's work backwards from that. What content can I produce to support those sales cycles? In terms of like, can I blog about? So like, if I'm my artist client, so when we put together her editorial calendar, she was big on getting people to shows where she was going to be. She really wanted to encourage people to remember to come to these big events and art shows where she was going to be. So we put the art shows in the calendar, and then we worked backwards. How many weeks do we think, like, notice do people need before they can show up to an art show, right? And so that's how we planned her content, was like, here are the pieces I'm producing for this show. Don't forget to come to this show. Or here's me packing up my house, packing up the artwork to get ready to go to this show. Don't forget to come. That was what we wanted. That was her goal, was to get people to come to these shows. So that's what we built her whole calendar on. So short answer, you're going to have to time yourself in terms of producing content. I can't tell you how long that should or shouldn't take you. And probably about a few hours every 6 months to plan out your calendar.
This is actually, you guys, the course that I took from Lacy, which is still available, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Focuses on this planning. You know, how do you figure out what please do put the link in. How do you figure out like what kinds of content you're going to use and like when are you going to pace them out? You know, I also do this kind of long-term planning for just marketing in general, you know, including non-blog stuff. And I think that you would say that too.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I would say about this is that it's important to remember that like writing the blog post is not the amount of time it takes you to produce content. Sure, you can produce it, but then you have to actually like put it on your blog and stick an image on there and like add an alt tag to your image and share it different places and all that stuff. And that takes, for me, that is the thing that stops me from blogging more often because that takes forever.
Yeah.
You know, it just,
and so, yes. And when you get to a certain point, like that's some of what we do for people is that we help them outsource some of those tasks so that they don't have to do those things. So we do everything from writing it all the way through to posting it, finding the image and so on and so on. So, you know, when you get to a certain point, that's something you can consider. Can I outsource this to an assistant or somebody like Lacy's team? But up until then, yeah, you do have to like consider all those different parts as well as promoting it, because I think a lot of times we have that field of dreams mentality. If I post it, they will come. And it's really not true. We have to promote it. That's how you get those big numbers, is sharing it places, getting in front of other people, asking your colleagues to share it, and so on.
Okay. Yeah.
Is automatically posting from a blog post to social media a good idea? Like, I'm not sure I really understand this question, so do you know what it means?
I'm not sure, but what I think it probably means is like, you know, there's plugins where you can like, when you post something, it like automatically shares to social media, just with the title or whatever.
Yeah. So no, that's not necessarily a bad idea. It's not necessarily a bad idea. However, you're going to get more engagement if you post it on your own, because the algorithms are set up to give it more play when it's you going in there and typing something. And you don't necessarily just want to share the blog post without any kind of commentary or any kind of, you know, like additional stuff, right? You want to share it to Facebook and say like, hey, do you have questions about this? Or like, you want to get engagement. That's the whole idea. So it's not necessarily a bad idea to use those automated things, but you'll get better results if you're actually sort of participating. And
and thinking about the channel it's going to go into.
Exactly.
Lacy, I know you use this, and I also use a company called CoSchedule, where you can program within WordPress a lot of social messages to reshare things. And anybody who follows me on social media sees the same posts going up, you know, that they get reposted regularly because most people miss them or they want to go back to them or whatever. So there's that.
Yep. 100%.
Okay. Done.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay. If you're working on different topics, do you suggest having separate blogs or one umbrella blog? And how do you present that? Okay, that's a really good question. And a lot of people have that problem. So I would ask you to think about your goals as a business. So are the same people going to buy for both of those topics? If the answer is yes, you could probably combine them in an umbrella blog. If the answer is maybe, you could probably combine them in an umbrella blog. If there's some crossover, if they're completely separate, they should probably have separate blogs. Because the other thing about blogging is that when you change channels a lot, when you switch topics, you lose people, right? So if you're trying really hard to sell books on one, and then over here you're selling, I don't know, something completely different, crayons, I don't know, something, I'm looking at like what's on my table, office supplies, they may be completely different. If, however, like Jessica was selling books on cartooning, and then she also wants to sell paper and pens for cartooning, there's crossover there, right? So that would be okay.
Yeah. And I think you should ask yourself, why are you posting on different topics?
Yeah.
Like what
are you diluting
what's
yourself?
the purpose of that for you? Well, I mean, the whole question of like, every time you write a blog post, you create content about what you do. It takes time, it takes energy. Is it feeding your goals? So this gets back to
a really good point, because if it's not,
blogging about writing,
why are you spending that time and energy?
Why are you doing this? Like, what is the purpose of it? Is it just like, I had this idea and therefore I have to do it? I would direct you to my blog post about idea debt and have you assess that question as a separate topic. And I'm not saying it's not worth, like, there is no reason for that, but like, you know, I go back and forth. Mostly I blog about creative process, creating a sustainable creative life. And under that umbrella, I have stuff like marketing and some business model stuff. It's very like subordinate, but it's there. You go back in history in my blog, it's stuff about like my book, you know, like creating my books and like, you know, comics and how to write comics and stuff. And it's like, none of that stuff, there's like a tiny proportion of people who have any connection to that who come to my blog now.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think that's true. And it's okay to change. Like, it's okay to change your mind and change direction as you go. But I think you do have to ask yourself. And also, your blog post on the idea debt is awesome. It's really smart.
Thank you. Okay, let's keep moving.
Yeah. Okay. Question about the artist you worked with. Was this artist closer to beginning, middle range, or very well established? One who had six? Oh, it disappeared. 6 pieces. Yeah. She is pretty well established. She's won a lot of awards, and she has pieces in museums already. So yes, I would say she's fairly well established.
Yeah. I mean, you're not even creating museum pieces for $100,000 unless you know that there's some market for that. That's
right.
Not
and I will also say, like, she has a list that she has created of curators and museum people specifically to market those pieces too. So like, she's not just blasting that out to her email list. That wouldn't make any sense, right? So she has a very specific list of people she's collected, people she knows or has had some kind of interaction with. That's who she's marketing those pieces to.
Okay. Yeah. And that's how she can afford working with Lacy at the high end, which is my aspirational goal, frankly. So
nice. How do you deal with the fatigue? Okay. Sorry, I'm not letting you hit the button. How do you deal with the fatigue of balancing all the things a content creator and a business person, especially when your creative content is a regular update? It can feel impossible sometimes to create content about the content as well. So true. So yes, you have to be conscious and cognizant of your energy. So a great example of this, I worked with Tanya Geisler. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her work, but she does a lot of work about the imposter complex and how you get over it. Highly recommended. She's awesome. But when I'm working with her, I know that she gives her soul to her small coaching community, right? She pours out her soul in that community. And it's a huge investment of energy, especially for her as a coach and someone who has to hold that space for people. And so I was telling her at one point, she was talking about, I can't pour myself into my blog posts in the same way when I'm doing this coaching work. And I said, don't. Like, when you're in that deep place where you're creating, you need to do something else for your marketing, or you need to automate it somehow, or you need to let's do a best of, let's go back and look at all my best blog posts from the last 5 years, whatever it is. But when you need to conserve your energy for the creative work that you do, you can't be doing both. There has to be a balance, right? There has to be a time when, if you're putting the manuscript in a drawer for a couple of weeks before you edit, maybe that's when you pour out a whole bunch of blog posts at once, or save them for the future or something like that. But there has to be some kind of balance. And so, Liz, I think the answer that you're looking for here is you're looking for a formula, probably, if you're like me. So, I mean, the answer is there are times when you're going to be more prolific as a marketing creator and more prolific as a creative person. And I think you should just be very cautious to protect those two containers, because they're different and they need to be different at different times. So when you launch a book or something like that, you have to be able to give all your energy to marketing, because that's what's the most important. But when you're creating the book, you can back off the marketing a little bit, because what's more important is the creative process. I hope that answers your question. To get really specific, you can produce marketing content when you're not actively trying to sell, like launch a book. You can produce marketing content as little as once a month. I wouldn't go any less than that, or people will forget about you. But if you're producing high quality content once a month, regularly, consistently, that's fine. I would say between once a month and once a week is the sweet spot for most people. So that's a question I get.
I'm guilty of totally slacking off on doing any blogging at all. When I'm like, I do it like I have sort of stints of doing it, and then just kind of like let it go and just like reshare stuff, and that's all I do. And I do my newsletter, so there's
right.
that,
but if you're
like,
resharing or you're doing the newsletter in between, that still counts. Like, I know you're like acting like yours content, but it totally counts. Okay, as long as you're still communicating with people, it counts.
Because I find the whole like the marketing process is in a totally different way and can be as creative as the creative, big C creative process.
Totally.
Coming up with new ways to say things and new ways to reach people and really being out there and being like present for people. All of those things are, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that it's important, I think, to acknowledge that so that people feel like the energy that's going into it is useful and also creative. Like you're not like giving up on something.
Mm-mm. Totally. I totally agree.
Well, you're giving up on something. It is a dilemma, but you're not.
Well, you're only one person, and we all feel like, especially when we're solopreneurs, when we're like one person shop, we feel like we have to do all the things. But at some point you have to decide, like, what am I going to focus on? I have to focus, or everything's going to be so diluted it won't be any good. And who cares at that point?
Which is where the dilemma comes up. So a lot of things, I'm going to hit Donna answering on this, because the next, there's some other things in here that I've seen pop up that are having to do with like, well, should I focus on this or should I focus on that? I don't want to give either of them up. And it's like, well, you're one person. So I understand wanting to have two kinds of work that sort of have equal place in your life. But the fact is, until you're able to, hire support for all of the things that you need to do in order to make your creative work function as a job, so you can hire people to help you with marketing and stuff like that. You may not have the bandwidth for that. And that is a dilemma. That is a true dilemma, that you will be giving something up by giving up one or more other projects. But what do you gain? And is what you gain, the focus and the depth that you can have with one thing, is it worth it?
I totally agree. I would like to, before I answer the next question, just very briefly talk about what I can do to help people. And then I want to be cognizant of people's time, but I'm happy to stay on and answer the remaining questions after the top of the hour. I just want to be cognizant of, like, if people have to leave.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, please do. Let's change gears for a second, and we'll come back to Q&A.
Just for a second,
I'm willing to hang around too.
Yeah, I just want to talk about real briefly, and this is not a hard sell. This is just to let you guys know what I have available if you need some more help with this. So if you are interested in finding out more about this, the green button under the presentation that says find out about Lacy strategy sessions will take you to this link, and that'll explain what's in them. But I thought I would just very briefly tell you what I do and how I can help. My main offer is a strategy session with me, which is totally bespoke, one-on-one. We look at your goals. We look at your metrics that you want to track. We look at what do you want to accomplish. And then we go as far as like, okay, great. Let's plan out exactly what you're going to write about on your blog for the next 6 months. So if you're struggling because you don't know what to blog about, this offer was made specifically for you. But also, if you like, I'm blogging regularly, but I'm not seeing the kind of sales I want, this offer was made specifically for you. Because what it is just basically getting my brain on your business and figuring out what the most effective marketing strategy will be for you. And so what it includes is 2 to 3 hours on Zoom, which is a video conferencing system, just kind of like this one. So like we really dig deep in 3 hours, right? Then I produce a checklist, a report that's like literally everything I think you should be doing. And it's like a checklist. And I also put at the top, because that can get kind of overwhelming, like if you only do 3 things, do these 3 things. We also produce a full 6-month editorial calendar. So it's literally every single week, if that's how often we decide you need to blog, what you're going to blog about and why. My analytics person will go in and either set up or tweak your analytics for you and create a custom dashboard to track the metrics that we've decided to track. So you actually start tracking numbers, because if you're anything like me, like Google Analytics is another language. You'll get a basic SEO report from my SEO gal. And then after I deliver all that stuff, we do a short follow-up call just to answer any questions. But also included is 6 months later, we get together and say, did it work? Okay, it worked, great. How do we do more of that? Oh, it didn't work as well as we wanted? Great. How do we tweak it so it does more what we want? So this is what I do for all my clients. And then after we do that strategy session, I can make recommendations if you are ready to outsource anything, but that's not a requirement to work with me. But I find these are very, very, very helpful when people are like, I feel like I have to do all the things. Where do I need to focus? This can help you focus. So just, there's a link on that page, lacyboggs.com/undercover, where you can just fill out a little form to apply, and I will be happy to it goes straight to my email box, so you'll get an email directly back from me. And the first consultation call to see if we're a fit is totally free. So if you feel like this might be something you're interested in, I would love to talk to you. Okay, spiel done. How do I get out of that?
And let me just again say, like, I've been following Lacy for a couple of years, and like getting her brain involved with what I'm doing would be awesome. And I will probably be signing up for one of these at some point in the near future. So
yeah,
it's not a hard sell, because I know that this may not be where a lot of you guys are, but there may be people here for whom this really makes sense.
And that's okay. If it's not where you are, it's totally cool. Go to my blog and dive into all the free stuff. Like, that's what it's there for. No problem whatsoever. But I just like to let people know how they can work with me so they can get some of these questions answered even more specifically.
And the course that you posted earlier is a good place to start too, in terms of like
exactly
doing it yourself.
The same thing in like a do-it-yourself version. Cool.
So,
all right, back to questions.
Back to questions.
Okay. So
do you have the start and stop things on your?
I don't. I can read them, but it doesn't say start and stop. So sorry.
Okay. So let's go to Jennifer's question here.
It does show up when it goes in a little orange box, so I know which one you're in. Okay. So how do self-promoting artists use content to extend their reach in an era where self-promotion is more challenging for all the reasons? Okay. Yeah. So I think the way I want to answer this question is slightly different than the way you asked it. But what I want to remind you, Jennifer, and everybody listening, is that self-promotion is not a bad word, and that you are doing people a service. You are helping them in some way. Even fine art, even expensive, super expensive fine art, is providing a service. It's answering a problem for people. And so therefore, like, when you remind people of what you do and how they can work with you and how they can purchase your art, you're solving a problem for those people. So I always want to put people back around to that mindset, because a lot of times we get in this weird place like, ooh, I'm self-promoting, ew, it's gross, and nobody will like it, right? I think that we have to get back to that mindset of helping. We are helping. Even if you're an artist who you feel like, well, people only buy it because, it's a luxury item. Well, yes, but you're still solving a problem. You're still making them feel a certain way, and that's solving a problem. So I want to double down on this, because I feel like for people who are creatives, like creative work in the world, other people's artwork, other people's novels or nonfiction work or whatever, so important to us. Mm-hmm.
Like, look around your space right now. Look and find the 3 or 4 or 5 things that are sitting there. Maybe a little like action figure on your desk, or like a novel that you're reading, or whatever it is, a nonfiction book that really helped you understand something. And how valuable those things are to you, how much they mean to you. Like, why is that action figure on top of your computer?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you look at it every single day? Because you love it. It gives you joy. And so turn that around and think about it for yourself. Like, you are the person who can do that for other people. I mean, Jennifer does an amazing animation series that gives people joy and laughs every time she puts it out.
Like, you don't know whose life you're touching with that. Like, you don't know whose day you improved, who you're giving hope to, who you're giving joy to, just because they need to get away from whatever it is, even if it's something that's like, oh, it's just funny, it's not, not changing the world. Yes, you're changing the world for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your question was how to extend your reach. I think the more you embrace that helping mindset, it will naturally grow, because you will be less weird about promoting yourself and sharing your work. And the more you share your work, the more it will grow organically. I hope that answered the question. I know I went a little sideways.
No, I think it's really good. I think just it's because it's so personal.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't talk about self-promotion, when we're talking about, I don't know, if we produce like hard drives and we're selling them, it's not self-promotion to sell that. It's a thing, right?
Right.
But when you're an artist, it's like it's yourself. It's not yourself. Mm-hmm. It's, again, that act of empathy with your fans, thinking like, what do you do for them? What is the thing that you do for them that makes them show up and makes them happy that they showed up? Mm-hmm. Whatever that thing is, that's what you're promoting. Mm-hmm. You're not promoting yourself. You're promoting access to that feeling, or value that people verifiably get from your work. Just ask them, ask the people, what do they get from your work? And then talk about that. Are we frozen here? Lacy? Chat room, anybody, can you hear me? Lacy's frozen. Okay, well, she'll come back in a second. Let's just wait a sec and probably her connection will refresh. So let's give it a second there. Okay, I will go ahead and answer a question or two while we are seeing if Lacy can come back. Okay, so I'm going to start with Therese here. Lacy's in Carbonite. We know the right people are here when they're referring to sci-fi. So how do we determine what channels to use, especially those of us just beginning? We don't have a big budget to pay for ads and such. What then? This is something that I took this from chat and stuck it over here. Therese, I think that the thing you need to think about, again, empathy. Where are your people showing up? You know about those people. You know something about who they are and what kind of channels make sense to them. And what I want you to think about is, can you think like what would they use? How are they going to feel most comfortable, essentially? Somebody else said in the chat that you should have it be about like where you feel comfortable, which is also the thing. So maybe there's a Venn diagram basically between those two things. And what I would say is pick 1 to 2 channels, focus on those, and forget the rest of them. You don't need to be posting things everywhere. You need to be much more like focused on a couple things and do them well, like really actually show up. So for me, my main channel is Facebook because people are there. I don't love Facebook, but I do it. And I post kind of relatively automatically on Twitter, and I do more personal kind of stuff on Instagram. That's it. I don't post. I have like an automatic posting on LinkedIn, a couple other things, but I don't like show up there really. And you really do have to limit those things. Okay, so hope that helps there. I'm going to just, Lacy, if you come back, you need to, oh, there you are. Okay,
sorry.
You came back. There you are. Hey.
I'm so sorry. My internet like completely died. Now we're using my phone as a personal hotspot. So I apologize.
Okay. That's fine. I answered a question while you were gone, so hopefully I did a good job.
Just keep rolling.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep it going. Okay. So let's look at Orit's question.
Okay. If all goes well, I'll have a middle grade novel published next spring. Congratulations. As of now, I have a very minimal social media presence. When should I start posting about it? Beside preliminary illustrations, what can I post? Great question. Okay, so we're going to talk about, like, he's launching a thing. He, I'm hoping.
She.
I apologize. Whatever pronoun you prefer. I apologize. So she's launching a thing, and we have a date next spring. The short answer is start promoting it now. Start posting about it now. The sooner you promote, the better. When it comes to so a lot of people I work with are like online course creators who are launching a course. And I always tell them you need to be promoting at least 6 to 8 weeks before your course is available to buy. And sometimes as far as 12 weeks out, okay? Because remember those big numbers we want? It takes time, right? It's going to take time. So I would absolutely start teasing it now. Besides preliminary illustrations, what else can I post? Okay, so you have a little bit of a unique situation because the person who's going to buy your book, because it's a middle grade novel, is almost certainly an adult buying it buying it for a child, right? Because of all the restrictions about children under 13 using the internet, you have to be very careful, right? So you're not actually writing your blog or whatever you're doing for the reader of the middle grade novel. You're writing it for the person who's going to make that purchase. So you need to be talking to parents, librarians, English teachers, whatever that might be. And so what I would start thinking about is, who else already has that audience that you can tap into? So for example, I have a little girl, she's 7. I follow a Facebook page that's called Mighty Girls, and they post lots of reviews of girl positive, girl empowering books. So that if your book is about an empowered little girl, which I don't know if it is, but that would be a good audience that you could borrow. So I would consider, like, how can I reach out to those people and see if they would like to review it before it comes out, or get in front of that audience in some way. So there's lots of examples of that sort of thing. Like if it's a very science heavy book, there's one my daughter loves right now that's about these kids who find a dinosaur bone. So like all kinds of dinosaur and paleontology sites out there that might reach parents that have kids who are obsessed with dinosaurs, right? So think sideways a little bit. How can you find that audience of parents and librarians and English teachers or whatever who know that their kids are already interested in XYZ? And especially since it's not in the US, you're going to have to think a little bit sideways. Like, where are those people in the country where it's being published? How do you find those people? So there may be Facebook groups, there may be blogs, there may be podcasts, you never know. But once you start doing that research, I would say, like, look at what kind of content they're producing, and that will help inform what kind of content will be interesting to that audience that you can produce. Plus, you can try to get in front of those. Like if you find a podcast that's relevant, try to get interviewed, apply to be interviewed on that podcast. So, but to answer your short question is like, now, start promoting now and think about what else those people are interested in, what else that audience is interested in that you can publish. I think illustrations are always fun because people like to get a sneak peek, but yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. It's pretty much what I would say too. And just, thinking about what the core of your book is, like what's the hook for the librarian who's going to order it, and talk about that. Like whatever the thing is is why the adults are going to order the book for the children. That's where you want your focus to be.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So Ben's got a question here.
Okay. What might you suggest for someone like myself who can commit to technical writing for programmers without issue, but the audience for our service is not programmers? Yes. Okay. So yeah, this is a great question. I get this a lot. It was like, well, I used to be in corporate, so everything I write sounds like a boring corporate memo. Or I used to be a lawyer, so everything I write sounds like it's written for lawyers. First of all, I think that anybody can train themselves out of that. So they trained you to be a technical writer. You can train yourself out of it. You probably don't talk like a technical writer. If I'm just going to have a conversation with you, Ben, I bet you don't talk in technical. Oh, no, I do. He said, well.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I've talked to you. You totally don't. Everybody who wants to know here, Ben runs the platform that I run Creative Focus Workshop on, and he's amazing, and the platform's amazing and very, very user-friendly. So I know you can do it.
I think the question then is really like, are you concerned about your writing style, or worried about the topics? Because that's two different questions for me. Like the writing style, we can train that technical writing out of you. That's no problem. But the best way to do that, in case people are wondering, is like to try to learn to write more the way you would speak to a friend. So like actually speak it out and have it transcribed, or start out your blog post by saying, "Dear Lacy," or "Dear Jessica," or somebody that you would talk to as a friend. If you keep a journal, if you keep even Facebook posts or something like that, look at how you write on those and say, what's, where do I come at it? How do I talk when I'm just talking to people, as opposed to like when I think I'm in business mode? Because this happens a lot. People like, oh, I'm writing for my business. I have to sound like a business. But 9 times out of 10, people say they work with me because they like me. And that is true of you too. So I think if the question is more about topics, then Ben, I know that you probably have a lot of questions from users. Okay, topics. Trying to figure out how I can contribute to growing Doki's audience, but with my strong suits. Okay, so like I would say for you, probably case studies would be a really exciting example, because you could say like, this person had this problem and here's how we solved it. And you don't have to get into like, here's how I wrote the code, but like, here's how I thought about the problem as a whole, and here's how we solved it. I think that's a really, use cases and case studies are extremely useful for stuff like what you're selling. And so the more you can talk about your process in solving those problems, the more excited people are going to be about working with you. Because I know from being in this world that the number one thing people say about Doki is that it's super user-friendly and that the support is awesome. So like the fact
I would literally go back to support calls and emails and see like, what did people ask you, like me? What did I ask you about? Like, what did I have a problem with? And how did you solve that problem?
Exactly.
And, it may not be a thing where it's like the sort of, it's not going to be a viral post, but for people who are really considering whether they're going to go with your platform or not, that's going to be really helpful.
That's a good point. And this goes back to goals. So the goal of those kind of posts may not be getting new traffic. It may be converting traffic you already have into sales, right? So those kinds of case studies would be about convincing people that are already there looking at you that Doki is the right option. Whereas if you're really looking for like SEO to get traffic, that's a different type of post, right? You can still write a case study that's SEO optimized for a certain search term that people are doing, which if you ever wanted to hop on a call, we could talk about how to do that and what that would look like. But in general, that kind of case study would be more the why there. The goal would be more about converting people who are like on the fence, right? Converting the looky-loos who are thinking about it to join, as opposed to like bringing in brand new people.
Which would probably help in terms of reducing your sort of anxiety level about it, because you're like, oh, I know what I'm doing here. I'm talking to people who are like, they've already read the case study that's the big kind of attention grabber, and now they want to know the details.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful.
We should probably get through this pretty quickly here. So
yeah, I know.
Alicia
we could talk about this stuff all day.
I know, I totally could, but we have like still 11 questions because they keep coming.
Oh my gosh.
So
okay.
Yeah, so we're going to go through this quickly. We may not get through everything, guys. I don't think we should hang out here for more than another 10 minutes or so. Yeah. Alicia wants to know if you can come back and take notes later. You may.
It'll be at this link, too.
At this exact link. That's why I love this thing. I love Crowdcast. Content for Patreon is supposed to be exclusive, so that means one needs to produce 2 levels of content, just 2 levels of access. And, it's tricky, so it's tricky. I mean, I find that tricky, the whole, like how much, I think the biggest thing, and this is something maybe Lacy, you can address a little bit, is this content debt, where you like overpromise to people, especially in the context of something like Kickstarter or Patreon. It's a huge thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I am a big proponent of not getting yourself into content debt. Also, like a membership site is a terrible place where they're like, I'm going to produce a brand new course every month for blah, blah, blah. That's a horrible situation to get yourself into. With different levels of access, whether it's Kickstarter or Patreon or something else, what you can think of is also like what do people really want from you? So is it more content, or is it access to you? Or is it access to the content earlier? Or is it swag? Or is it like, a lot of times I see, especially people who have a personality driven brand might just provide access to one of those higher levels. So it's like a once a month Q&A call where they can ask anything. But that doesn't require anything from you except showing up for that hour to answer questions, right? You don't have to create a whole new comic or whatever it is that you sell. So I think Liz makes a good point also about early access is a common reward. So you get it first. People who are really excited to see the next installment of your thing. So like probably for her webcomic, that makes perfect sense because everybody's waiting for the next strip, right? Waiting for the next installment. Depends on what you're producing. But yeah, that can be a really good one too. But think is there something else? This also goes for bonuses. Like you don't necessarily have to create a whole new thing for a bonus. Like if you're selling a book and you want to add bonuses, you don't have to write a whole nother book. It might be like you get a Facebook group where you can talk about the book, or you get to come on a Q&A call and talk to me about the book, or you can, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to create more content in order to offer a bonus or an upgrade of some kind.
Yeah, I think really strategically about that because otherwise it's like a never-ending snowball.
You're painting yourself into a corner there.
Yeah. All right, let's call that done. And I'm gonna get one more question here, and then we're gonna call it.
Yeah, you choose.
So, yeah, I'm looking through.
Also, if I do not answer your question, and you're just dying and have a burning question, come find me, my Facebook page, and feel free to ask it there, and I'd be happy to answer it there.
Okay, let's answer Angela's question here. Do you see it? It's at the bottom.
Okay, yes, I see it. So for blogging, pop news sites, all these things still apply. I'm starting a site with my friends and want to build that and my fiction work. Audience is starting from scratch for us. Okay, so I hope I understand what this is. So you're talking about a site where the product is the blog as opposed to having a separate product. There's two business models here. So something like BuzzFeed, the product is the blog, right? The product is the content. They don't sell necessarily, I mean, they may sell t-shirts or something, but that's not their main business goal, right? Whereas with my business, the blog is in support of the product as opposed to the product itself. So when you're creating a blog where the content, the blog itself is the product, the way you make money is different, right? The way you make money is through advertising usually, or sponsored posts, or sometimes affiliate marketing, like you put a link to an Amazon thing so they can buy it and you get a commission. In all of those cases, it's that Walmart model. So the more people you get, the more money you make. So think about BuzzFeed. They're a great example. All those clickbaity headlines and stuff that BuzzFeed is known for is because they make money every time somebody clicks on that link and lands on their page, because they get paid by how many eyeballs see the advertisements on their page. That's how they make money. So when the blog is the product, it's really the advertising, it's really the sponsorships that you get for that makes you the money. So that means you need as many eyeballs as you can possibly get. So that it's that really you have to go wide. You don't go deep with those in terms of like nurturing one person to come back and buy your thing. Whereas that's what I would do, right? If I want to talk to people in person, because if I nurture one person, I make money. That's how they buy my services. Whereas with like a BuzzFeed, we need millions of people to support their business model, right? You personally probably don't need millions of people, but you need tens of thousands to support advertising or sponsored posts.
Probably hundreds of thousands to make significant money, especially if it's a shared thing. I mean, if it's just a hobby, that's fine. But if you're trying to make a business out of it, it's really like, it's very mass market kind of business model.
Yeah.
And that is totally, let's just cut to the chase here, totally different from building an audience for your fiction and buying books. That's really what we've been talking about this whole time, is like, how do you build an audience that's loyal to you, that knows you, that has all of these, sort of these connections to who you are and all this other stuff. That's a totally different kind of marketing. And that's what applies to most people here, but obviously not in every case, right?
Yeah.
But this is not like this group in general, we're not bloggers.
Yeah.
We're using a blog, we're using the tool of blogging to draw attention to something else that we do. And this is a key thing that we didn't mention it up front, right? Just because you have a blog does not make you a blogger.
Right.
The blog has a role, right?
Yeah. In most of your cases, the blog is the marketing piece that's selling something else. But in Angela's example, the blog is the product that's selling the advertising, basically. So they're very, very different. I mean, in general, some of the things I said still apply, but it's a very, very different.
Sure, but
somebody else had
very
asked,
different model.
what about the 1,000 superfans theory? It's like those are the two polar opposites, right? So if you're selling artwork that you only need to sell, like, let's say 50 pieces in a year to make your revenue goals, that's the 1,000 superfans theory, where you really only need 1,000 superfans who love you and will buy your stuff in order to support yourself, right? On the other hand, if you're selling, like if you're doing the blogging and advertising is your business model, you need way more than 1,000 superfans.
Right. And the 1,000 superfans, remember, this is 1,000 people who will each spend at least like $100 on you in every single year.
Every time you offer something.
1 to 3%, if that's 1 to 3% of your like email list, for example, then you need an email list of 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. And that's going to, there's a lot of churn
like
there.
The really
they come and go.
And
then you need what is it, 1 million people? Like 1 million people to actually see your offer. Like the 1,000 superfans is like fine but you have to understand the numbers.
Yeah. And the really sad thing is that most of the people on your email list will never buy from you. And that's okay. They can sit there if they want to and look at all your stuff. But, if we're going with 1 to 3%, 99% of the people will never buy from you, which is sad, but true. For all of us.
Sad, but true. Yeah. Okay, so let's call the questions session. Thank you so much for all of this. I just want to say one thing to you guys who's still here.
Yeah.
Good on you for showing me, coming here, like staying the whole time. But also I want to point right up here above my head here. See, it says schedule session 1 of 2. This is actually, for whatever reason, I decided to set this up as a 2-parter. So the second half of this, which is going to happen on June 28th, is me presenting about how to get your projects onto a calendar and get them done. And my sort of thinking about this is to approach this as like your content calendar, like the things that you want to do, the blog posts you want to make, whatever, like how do you think about that? So you're already registered, so you will hear about it, but I just want to make clear that that's what's going on there. It's up there. And I just want to say thank you again for Lacy spending all this time with us, and everybody, can we have a virtual round of applause? Because that was awesome. It was really, really helpful.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't like too overwhelming, but yeah, I just put my Facebook link in there. So if I didn't get to your question, feel free to come and answer it. I'm happy to.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. Thanks everybody. And we will see you soon. We'll see you around. Thanks, Lacy.
My pleasure. Thank you. See you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.